EFF President Julius Malema has called on those elected to party positions to possess leadership that's politically grounded and that will appreciate the difficult questions that are confronting the people of Gauteng and the EFF. Malema was giving a closing address at the Gauteng 3rd Provincial People's Assembly this afternoon.
We need highly politically charged and highly politically conscious leadership of the EFF. And one of the understanding of such leadership is the leadership that understands that forming an organization, you don't form it for yourself. It is not a foundation. It's not Nelson Mandela Foundation. It's not Julius Malema Foundation. And it will be an irresponsible statement for anyone who was there when we formed the EFF that we formed it and therefore they hijacked it. That is the most politically illiterate person, that we have never formed an organization that will belong to us until we die.
Malema has also called on party members to avoid appointing women into inferior positions.
We must refuse this thing of relegating women in the EFF into positions of deputy, secretary and treasurer. We must make sure that as we grow the organization, we appreciate that women can actually lead like men because they are at the same level. Women are not sub-members of the EFF. They are full members of the EFF.
Malema has also vowed to take decisive action against party members committing corruption.
We have a problem of corruption in South Africa. And we've started to have a problem of corruption in the EFF now. That when people are sent to the leadership of the EFF, who are leading at regions or provinces and all of that, people will demand money in exchange to helping those people with whatever problems they are confronted with in those municipalities. We can never fight successfully against corruption if we in the leadership of the EFF are going to accept bribes and become part of palace politics and corrupt elite of South Africa. You ought to stay away from corrupt people and do not take unsolicited, even solicited gifts from dodgy characters who may be in trouble tomorrow, and because they are in trouble, they will drag you into those troubles and you will drag the EFF into those troubles. Corruption must be fought from inside here, internally in the EFF, if it raises its ugly head.
At the same time, Johannesburg Mayor Mpho Phalatse has given Eskom 14 working days to formulate a plan of action to resolve the Soweto electricity crisis. Phalatse explained that she has written to Eskom and the Public Enterprise Minister, Pravin Gordhan, with no response yet. She warns of leading a march to the power utilities headquarters if officials fail to respond on time.
I was very honest with Soweto residents. We don't own Eskom, we don't run Eskom. As the city, my role is one of a mediator between the residents and Eskom, and I've played that role well. I've reached out to the minister, I've reached out even to the CEO of Eskom. I've had a bilateral with Eskom Gauteng officials in the Metro Center in Johannesburg. And we've had several engagements, but the ball is now in the court of Eskom to make sure that our residents get the services that they need and to make sure that they repair their relationship with Soweto residents. I did say, though, that I've not received a response from the minister, and that if I don't get a written response with an action plan within 14 working days, I will lead a march with the residents to Eskom, and hopefully then we will get some answers.
Phalatse added that her team is trying to ensure that residents are well served.
When we engage in bilaterals, Eskom is very forthcoming, very promising to turn the situation in Soweto around. I think what I haven't seen, and that's what I keep reiterating, even yesterday with the Gauteng representative that was here, is that we need to see an action plan. We need to see for all the areas that are affected, what are the issues, what is the plan going forward, and by when is that going to be implemented? I believe that's what residents need to see as well, and residents need to know what is their role in making that happen. I did not see that forthcoming. I have requested subsequent to the meeting yesterday that we receive that in writing and that we engage further so that we continue the mediation process and make sure that our residents are served well.
Still to come, we take a look at the Daily Dispatch celebrating 150 years in existence. We have that conversation shortly after this. Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. The Daily Dispatch is celebrating its 150th year of publishing. The newspaper was first published on September 10th in 1872. Joining us to share some of the historic highlights of the newspaper is Chiara Carter, Editor-in-Chief of the Daily Dispatch and former Editor of the Daily Dispatch, Sbu Ngalwa. Very good afternoon to you both. Thank you so much for your time. Perhaps starting off with you, Chiara. It's been an entire 150 years. What a significant time to have been publishing stories, educating, informing, and of course making a difference in society. How does it feel to be part of a newspaper that's been in existence for so long? Okay, I'm not sure if Chiara can hear me. Sbu, perhaps let me pose the same question to you. Being part of such a newspaper that has made tremendous strides in informing and educating the masses for so long. Okay, we appear to have a bit of a problem there, but we will go back and try and ensure that both guests can hear us. Let's take you to this matter. Okay, bringing you live visuals now of the developing story. Of course, Queen Elizabeth's passing. We're giving you those live visuals in London where crowds have lined the streets. They've lined the streets as the Queen begins a final journey through Scotland. The Queen's coffin has been in the Scottish capital after leaving Balmoral Castle for the last time. And what you're seeing on your screen there is the first leg of an 8-day journey to the monarch's final resting place. We will continue, of course, to give you more as you see the live visuals of the final, journey through Scotland with the mourners on the sides of the street, just commemorating her life and also recalling her life with the stories that we've heard throughout the course of the past few days. We'll continue to bring you more shortly after this. We take you back to the Daily Dispatch, celebrating its 150th year of publishing. The newspaper first published on September 10 in 1872. Joining us to share some of the historic highlights of the newspaper is Chiara Carter, Editor-in-Chief of the Daily Dispatch and former editor of the Daily Dispatch, Sbu Ngalwa. Very good afternoon to you both. I'm hoping that the line is a lot clearer now. Chiara, starting off with you, just to talk and reflect on the highlights of the journey that has made such a huge impact in people's information and learning and celebrating some of the crucial headlines that can never be forgotten.
Well, I think the Dispatch has come a very long way from its first 4-page edition way back when it was largely advertising, in fact entirely advertising on the front page. Although obviously advertising remains very important. It was a shipping and mercantile focus that the paper had. The paper from then to now has become part of the very fibre of the Eastern Cape, particularly obviously East London where it's based. It's covered, 150 years of South African and world history, which is an incredible breadth. It's covered major events in the country, union, war, shipping remains very important, the shipping disasters, right up to the Oceanos, major discoveries in the province, and of course, major political moments. The Dispatch is very famous for its editor Donald Woods' relationship with Steve Biko, and after his death at the hands of apartheid police, Donald Woods' campaign to make that public knowledge and bring the minister at the time, Jimmy Kruger, to account for it, Donald Woods fleeing into exile. That kind of standard of brave journalism has stayed with the Dispatch through the years, covered things like the Bishu massacre, freeing of political prisoners, Nelson Mandela's release, Madiba's visits to the Eastern Cape, the Mercedes-Benz that he received, right through to things like the Mandela funeral scandal, the less salubrious, right? Corruption. It's been at the forefront of exposing corruption in government and private sector, and standing up for the people, ordinary people and their rights. That's one of its missions, to tell the truth, to speak truth to power, and I think it continues to do that remarkably strongly today. Sbu, you would agree, because, I mean, you've been at the forefront of some of those stories.
Yeah, and I suppose, Sbu, just turning to you also, you've been at the forefront of a newspaper that's been in existence for 15 decades. I mean, Chiara highlighting some of the highlights that, in terms of opinion and commentary that have really informed audiences, loyal readers for such a long time.
That's true. That's true, Paul. And I think just to pick up where Chiara has left off, the reality is that if you look at the Eastern Cape, I always argue that the Eastern Cape is actually lucky, and so is South Africa, to have a paper like the Daily Dispatch. And Paul, you would have heard at some time or over time, there's this often repeated claim that the Eastern Cape is the most corrupt province in the country. And I argue that I think the Eastern Cape is corrupt, but it's not more corrupt than any other province in this country.
I agree.
But the only difference between any other province in the Eastern Cape is that in the Eastern Cape, you've got very strong local media in the form of the Daily Dispatch, a newspaper that punches way above its weight and a newspaper that is able to hold the powerful to account. As a result, over the years, you have seen this testy relationship between authorities, be it the apartheid authorities or even a democratic government, where you have the same challenge, where there is a butting of heads between the leadership of the newspaper and those in power. But I think what it has not lost is that spark and that ability to tell people's stories and to make a difference in people's lives and be a strong local newspaper. I mean, even today, if you look at the national awards in this country, the Daily Dispatch is right up there with highly resourced newspapers and news organizations. And it is just a small newsroom on a corner of East London, but it plays such an important role in making a difference. I think it talks to the importance of local journalism in this country, especially now when we're going forward and looking at a threatened traditional media, particularly print media in this country, as a result of things like COVID-19, but also the decline that we've seen over the years.
Yeah. Chiara, how do you think that the Daily Dispatch has changed the face of journalism, also, in fact, looking at journalism broadly and the impact of local journalism?
The Dispatch actually, oddly enough, has always been at the forefront of tech change. In terms of things like bringing in colour to newspapers, really odd. From Little East London, it's actually looked at the next step for media. And in terms of digital, actually, it was one of the earliest, it kind of died away a little bit and has now come back, the earliest digital media proponents. Now, Dispatch is very much, its print edition is very alive, but its digital, Dispatch Live, is thriving and growing and using digital in the way that one uses it best, by breaking stories and interacting with its readers and building circulation, because you obviously need a sustainable media. You need to actually have people subscribe, you need to have advertising, you need to ensure that your newsroom can continue to do the work that it needs to do. Because it's so rooted in the province, and Dispatch is amazing. When I worked under Sbu and actually succeeded him editing the paper for a while, and the thing that amazed me in the Eastern Cape is how powerful the Dispatch name is. It has a resonance. People have grown up with the Dispatch, and it's a trusted brand. So during COVID, for example, people turn to Dispatch and Dispatch Live to find out what's going on, to really know, in a time of great anxiety, that its resonance is quite extraordinary. And that rootedness in history, local, a long legacy, where your grandmother used to read the Dispatch or your teacher brought it to the classroom, is, I think, the strength of local media. It focuses on uniquely Eastern Cape stories. One of our former editors, it's Bongani Sikoko, I think, said local but not parochial. And I think that has stayed with the Dispatch through the years. It breaks amazing stories that in any other part of the country, they're extraordinary stories, but it also keeps readers in touch with the South African story. And yeah, I think that's part of its strength at the moment.
Yeah, Chiara, thank you. Perhaps, Sbu, just rounding up the conversation, Chiara speaks about a powerful brand with fond memories rooted in history. In fact, just looking on social media this morning, I saw Sipha Kema, who's a journalist, Sbu, you would know her. She also speaking about her fond memories of going out to town with her father to buy the Daily Dispatch.
Everyone who has ever lived in the Eastern Cape or is from the Eastern Cape has their own Daily Dispatch anecdote. In fact, it's not unusual to hear elderly people saying, go get me the Dispatch, and all that they mean is a newspaper, and any newspaper. The same goes for me, because my father was into horse racing, so he would buy the Daily Dispatch every morning and would flip it to the back and then would look through for the results and then come read the newspaper. And that was how actually I was introduced to journalism, through a very strong political column in the Daily Dispatch that was written by one Eric Naki back in the 1990s. That's what piqued my own interest in journalism. So going back to the Daily Dispatch as editor in 2016 was like homecoming of sorts. Also because of the fact that I had been rejected by the very Daily Dispatch as an intern way back in 2001. So it felt good to go back and also to work for this iconic newspaper that has made a difference to so many people and that continues to thrive even today in as difficult as an environment we're operating in as the media in general in this country.
Thank you so much. We're going to have to leave it there for now. Thank you so much to Chiara Carter, Editor-in-Chief of the Daily Dispatch, and Sbu Ngalwa, who's former editor of the Daily Dispatch, speaking to the significance of the Daily Dispatch celebrating 150 years.